Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. So today it's me, Helder Gonçalves, straight out of Oslo office. And together with me, you have Christoph Gams. Hi, Christoph.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Hamburg, Germany. All right, today's webinar, Helder, we talk about REST APIs, right?
Exactly. So we're going to talk about the Planet 8 new feature, which is the REST API designer. And we're going into detail on how to use this REST APIs, not only for integration, but as well as microservices being used directly on the application development. So we're going to explore that, show you where you can find this more information about it, and give you the big picture. What does this change for ACP?
Right, so let's jump right into it.
Let's start here with some introduction on what this is part of. So this is part of the Neptune DX platform. The Neptune DX platform, and DX stands for Digital Experience, is made of two different modules, Planet 8 and Planet 9. Planet 8 is ACP first, and Planet 9 is API-centric. So what this means is that Planet 8 is basically running on straight out of the NetWeaver stack on any ACP system. So it's targeting directly ACP systems, and Planet 9 technology is Node.js, which means that it has as a target to cover any other process that you have outside of ACP systems. Traditionally at Neptune, we've been always into the ACP market. And with Planet 9, we are also giving the ability to cover processes and systems, any system, any process that also runs outside of ACP. But we're doing it by doing the same user experience, not only for the applications, but as well as how do you actually build and manage these applications.
Right, so developers who've been working with Neptune for a time, for a couple of years maybe, know where we're coming from, right? So it's always been ABAP based, and when you build brand new Fiori apps based on Planet 8 on your ABAP stack, then your backend service, your web service, has always been and will always be an ABAP class, right? The new stuff is now we want to connect the dots. We want to open this up to connect to other systems and to connect multiple ABAP classes to your Fiori apps.
Exactly. And today we are covering the one part of this DX platform, which is the ABAP-based REST API. So on this slide, you can see how we can expose and consume data with our DX platform. So this is definitely an API-centric and API-first kind of approach for a platform, where of course we are covering the oData world as well. But today and this day and age, every single IT provider is actually going from using other technologies to use REST API. So everything is moving forward using REST APIs. So we want to provide that ability as well, not only for the non-ACP processes, but what we're covering here today is the actual ACP processes. So we're going to show you a no-code way to build a REST API on top of a data provider class, and we're going to call it DPC for short. And this ABAP class is not more than an ABAP class with an interface, which will, with our tool, enables you to integrate with ACP very easily. Plus, not only integrate, but you can use this REST APIs directly on your application developer, directly on your application designer, so that you can build your applications using a microservice approach.
Okay, so basically, if you wrap it up, your ABAP classes become microservices that can be exposed to your Fiori apps or to any other system, right?
Exactly, and ACP has done a great effort on doing that using oData. So you have, for instance, an example, you need a microservice to manage customers, and you need another microservice to manage sales orders. So you build two different microservices, and the way ACP is doing this is using oData protocol as a support for this microservice architecture. So what we are trying to say and state is that you can go towards the future, you can go towards REST API by using our tool, which enables you to build a REST API with Swagger on top and Bing Swagger and open documentation for REST APIs directly from the ABAP stack. oData is good, but we believe that REST API can be better. One of the reasons is the tooling. The tooling around oData is not friendly. It's not easy. It's not no code. So what we're trying here is to build a completely different way to expose and create these microservices by using REST APIs with a no-code designer.
Yeah, and if you look at the world, basically, you know, at the leadership of the world regarding the internet and systems, if you look at Facebook, if you look at Amazon, Google, Twitter, they're all using REST APIs, right? If you want to connect to those kind of systems, REST API is state of the art. That's what we believe in.
Exactly. That's what we are making available directly to any ABAP stack. So this is something that can work on a SAP NetWeaver Stack 7.0.1 up to the latest version of S/4HANA, and this is actually certified by SAP. So this is our product, our platform, Planet 8, is able to build this REST API architecture, this microservices REST API architecture directly on any ABAP stack.
Pretty cool stuff.
Pretty cool stuff. But how does this work? This works in the following. So ACP NetWeaver Stack has the ICF node, the CCF transaction, basically, where you're going through the ICM. And we've been doing that for applications. So what we've done is that we twisted things around, and we're using the ability that from an ABAP class, which is now called a data provider class, you can actually build without coding a REST API. So you can turn any ABAP class that you already have into a REST API just by adding one interface. So all public attributes of your ABAP class will be able to be sent and received as a REST API operation, as well as all the methods of your ABAP class can now be operations into REST API. And that's out of the box, zero code.
Okay, so hold on. That means as a developer, I create my ABAP class, right? I have my private methods calling BAPIs, function modules, whatever, direct selects from your database. And the REST API part is done by Neptune.
Exactly. Simple.
No code.
And what does that mean for your architecture? So until now, one of the problems was how to integrate with SAP. So you had RFC function modules, enable function modules. So you had iDocs and oData. But the tooling on oData, as we said, is not the optimal. So we're selecting a fourth different way to do it, which is REST API. So what this means is that on top of every single NetWeaver stack you have, either being ECC, CRM, SRM, or any other ABAP stack, you can just add Planet 8. With this, enables you to create REST APIs directly on top of your stack, and then expose that to your architecture, either being consuming by, let's say, if you have Oracle, or if you're using IoT, or if you're using any other system on your landscape that needs to communicate with SAP, needs to fetch data from SAP, you'll be able to do so by using the REST API instead. And that means that also at the same time, you can actually build applications that on top of this same REST APIs, so you can build applications for desktop, for mobile that runs online and offline, just using this architecture.
Okay, so basically what that means is harmonizing my UI across different systems and integrating those systems in a way becomes one thing with our platform, right?
Exactly. One single way of doing things. So if you have already applications that are using the ABAP class, you have to change nothing in your application. They will still run anyway. But if you want to add to your application any other microservice, instead of having to add that to your ABAP class, you can just build a data provider class for that microservice and then you expose that into your applications as a REST API. So you can have multiple REST APIs. So we're going to show you that actually in the making in our designer. But first, a small overview of actually the no-code REST API designer. So enables you to build microservices to expose and consume these microservices and expose them as universal language, the Swagger. These same microservices, they can be running on stateful or stateless. So you can actually have a REST API that is stateful. That's non-existing before Neptune has done so.
So I mean, stateless and stateful, that's really something important, I believe, especially in the SAP world. I mean, if you look at web applications, of course, the de facto standard, the best practice is to create them stateless, right? Of course, we want to increase the performance server side, but the SAP world is a bit different. I mean, sometimes it's just business critical data, so you need your standard locking mechanisms, right? That SAP provides.
Yeah, this enables you by using the REST stateful.
So a structured layer of RESTful APIs that are working stateful in your SAP systems. That's what you can do. Coding in ABAP. Pretty exciting.
Really cool. So how can you do this? So let's go to our cockpit. So this is the Planet 8 cockpit as you know it. And inside the cockpit, and this is something that when you upgrade from a previous version of Neptune over to Planet 8, you're going to get this cockpit instantly. So there is no need to refactor the applications. There is no need to basically change anything on your applications or mobile clients or anything. It's a technical upgrade, doesn't require you to actually convert anything. It's done automatically. But what that gives you is additional tools, additional functionality. One of them is under connectivity, the REST API. And what is the REST API? So if I go here into this application test, this API here, I can see the API has a data provider class, a DPC. And I can even see what this DPC is. It's not more than just an ABAP class that you have a interface added to it. So if I go now to my SAP GUI and show you this on SE24, you can see that here that we just added an interface to the ABAP class, and because we added the interface, all public attributes of this class are available to the class operations. And what are these class operations? The class operations are not more than the public methods that you have available here. So you see you have get customer data, get customer list, update customer. So this can be 3 different operations on your REST API. But how do you build this? So if you go back to the cockpit, you can see that I've added on the header a package, a regular ABAP stack package, as well as a version. I can also say that this data provider class does not exist in this system. So if I have a front-end split architecture, so I have an NetWeaver gateways where I have P8 running, and I can have P8 running on the back as well, I can say that this ABAP class does not exist here. It exists on the destination, which is this specific RFC destination.
Some backend system, yeah.
Exactly. And I can run it as stateful. So we make stateful as simple as a checkbox, actually. So I can add some more information to the different providers that are going to consume this. Bear in mind that these different providers can be other systems on your landscape as a customer. And where you're going to see different things, very important things on the REST API world, such as the versioning, such as the information, such as what does this do, documentation.
Yeah,
you can also...
pretty amazing. If I look to the list on the left, get customers, get one customer, update customer, those are REST functions, right? Get, post, update, delete, and all you did was coding them up.
Exactly. And of course, you can add to it the policies that you know that can be added to it, which can be users, they can be SAP roles, or your custom ABAP coding, or how this policy is valid or not. This same policies that you have added to the tiles, that you added to the applications and to the launchpads, they can be added to the REST APIs as well. So you're going to be actually able to manage the access to your REST APIs, not just by exposing it to anyone, but anyone that actually has the right roles in SAP. So that's also very important. But looking into the operations, I can say I can define a path to the operation. Then, of course, we can define, I'm going here on edit mode, the different HTTP methods. And of course, these methods you can use are delete, get, post, and put, which are, how did you call it?
CRUD, right? It's the CRUD methods.
Exactly, these are the CRUD methods of REST APIs. And then you identify which method of your ABAP class do you want to use for this operation. And then depending on the HTTP method that you have selected, you can have a request where you define, and these are the input parameters, import parameters of this method. And on response, you can define what kind of response are you actually filling in inside that same ABAP class, which class attributes are you actually filling on that, and then you can even compress. So without having to change anything on your code, you can actually decide to expose less or more on each operation. And we'll handle everything else for you. Yeah. So this is a complete no-code approach.
So here, when I look at this, okay, this is my JSON response in the end, right? My ABAP tables will be parsed by Neptune into JSON, which is, or JSON-H, which is, a low-code, no-code approach. I agree.
Yeah, and of course, in here you can also trace and see the usage of your different applications, but also, and you can see by user, which REST API, which operation, in which period, and you can see who's using what. And most importantly, you can actually test out with Swagger. So if I go here to get customer, and I say try it out, execute, I can actually see my JSON response in here.
That's my data, yeah. Looks like KNA1, huh?
Exactly. But how to use this then in an application? So for integration, this will be obvious because you can just go here to the API designer, click on the Swagger button, and we generate the Swagger documentation on the fly. You copy, and then you go to your destination system, regardless of being whatever, and you just paste, use this Swagger, and you import and start consuming this API, this REST API, straight out of the SAP. So how to do this
hold on.
application?
For 1 second, I'm sure we have some ABAP developers here who've never heard about Swagger. Swagger is a tool to test your APIs, and it provides you a so-called open API specification, right? That's what it is, which is basically a document that explains the structure of your API and the data you're receiving. So you can grab it, you can import it into any other system, and then that system will understand and be able to use your API, right?
Exactly. The Swagger is to the REST API the same thing as a visual file is to a web service in a way.
Right. Nice.
But the Swagger is much more complete with it because it has documentation. You can add comments, you can add examples, data to test out your API. You can add all of that into the Swagger. So that's pretty more clear to whatever system is consuming that you can actually how to consume the data of this same REST API. So this can all be done in one single place. But how to consume this on the app designer? So let's go to our app designer. And this is a sample that is available now for you to check it on the Neptune Explored. And it's a very simple sample. So if I just run the application in here, what this does is that here on the left-hand side, I have a tree, I have a list, and this list is coming through a specific REST API. So when I click on one of this, I can see on the right-hand side the information of my customer, and I can see the information of the orders. But how does the data get here? So by doing so, and let's shrink this, get a little bit more space. You know how the application designer works if you know how to do Neptune. it's very simple, it's by drag and dropping. So by drag and dropping, you have under resources a new component called REST API that you just drag and drop in place into your resources. Then on the resources, you say which REST API, you give it a name within the context of your application, and you say that you want it to be a REST API, and you say which one is it, so you can see the list of the REST APIs that are available on this system, the same ones as you have done it on the designer. And you can also select which operation you want to use. And then here you can see exactly on the operation, as well as the data send and receive. And how is this all being done? This is being done not here on the app designer, but you're doing this directly on the API designer. On the API designer is where you're going to define what kind of data are you going to get and how you're going to get it. So it's very similar to what we were doing before with Ajax, but now there is no Ajax. Now there is REST API.
Right, you have the different methods, the functions of your API.
So exactly, let's see how to bind this. So if I just go here into edit mode, into my application, and go into where I have this list, I can go into the master list, and I can see that it's mapped to an IT customer, which would be similar to what you would have with an ABAP class. And bear in mind here on the settings, I have no application class for this example. So if I go in here and go to the binding, what I can see is my two different APIs that I'm using there, and I can see different operations with different returns. And of course, on each one, you can have different tables and structures on the same response. And this is all done on the API designer. But if I bind this as it is, I can then go into the master list items, and you can see how the binding is working. So I'm binding it directly to a field on a REST API response instead. So the binding principle is exactly the same, but you're doing to a REST API. And this same REST API is a microservice, which means also that you can integrate. So just want to underline that using it. So it all works exactly in the same way as before. So you can do offline, you can do mobile, you can do desktop, doesn't matter. Development process is exactly the same. So what changes? So before we get online of the component where we had the Ajax call. Now we don't do that anymore. What we do is something very similar. So if I go here to this button and go into the press event, I can see what I'm doing. I'm doing get online of my customer list.
Looks very familiar to me.
Yeah, very familiar. So we're calling, instead of doing get online of the table or the Ajax component on where you are doing it, you are doing get online of the actual name of the name within context of your REST API operation. So the name of this component that you have down here. And that retrieves the data from the backend over to the application and adds to the UI5 model on your component. And then if the model is set to be offline, this response of a REST API is offline on your application. Simple. But now,
we basically, what we do is we keep all the smart and simple stuff that you guys are used to from Neptune. And now we open this up to the latest standard on the web, to REST, right?
Exactly. Just a final showing here. Whenever I click on the list item here on the preview, and I'll show you here, when I click here, I get some data here on the right-hand side. So this data is actually being fetched from the backend by using the other operations. So I'm passing parameters to my REST API. So for instance, I'm putting whatever item is been selected, I'm getting the customer ID, and then I'm passing the customer ID as import parameters of the class method. And you pass it like this, and then on the call, before we had the Ajax call or the Ajax value, or in which you pass just one content, now you can pass actually multiple contents. Is the parameters that the REST API actually receives. So if I go into get one customer, get online, get one customer, and go to see this one. So it's using the get one customer get operation. How can I see this get operation? What it does? Just go into my designer, get one customer, and I can see on the request that I'm actually have a Kunanar importing parameter. I can also pass the name, but I decided on as an option on my application just to pass as just the Kunanar. I could have passed also the name field as an exception. And that is all about how you handle this on the ABAP class. It's not more than just doing ABAP. So what you have to focus, just a quick recap to finalize today's webinar. You have an ABAP class that becomes a data provider class, and this ABAP class becomes a REST API. This REST API can be used in two ways. First would be the integration layer. You can add it and expose it to whatever system you want to. And second, you can use directly on the app designer to build applications. And where and how you maintain this? Simply by doing ABAP and nothing else. So you'll be doing and reusing what you know, what you have already. So reinforcing the idea that you're using what you already have. You have your custom code, you have your standard code, you have your data layer, your business layer, and you can reusing everything that you have spent time improving and making it available. But now you're making it available not only to applications, you're making it available to any system. Simple, without making one single line of code.
Pretty amazing. I mean, this is basically Neptune Software goes REST, right? So yeah, if you look at the SAP products that are coming up, as for the new SAP API Business Hub, yeah, you can use your ABAP resources to create REST APIs that can be consumed directly on that Business Hub and on the SAP Cloud Platform as well, of course. So
exactly,
these will be APIs you won't hate. That's what we're saying.
And also, as a final statement, if you want to use this REST APIs on the ACP Web IDE, if you don't want to use our designer and want to use the ACP Web IDE, and just use the Swagger import on the API management, on the ACP Cloud Platform, and then use those resources into your applications using ACP Web IDE if you want. And if you want to use oData, sure. It's all about what you would like to do, but what leverages what you already have with minimal effort is by using Neptune.
All right. Thanks, Helder.
Thank you.
This is amazing news. Neptune goes REST. Thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.